Yes, it has.
Thank you. Missy Waters, everyone. Thanks, Missy. Okay, a couple of things. This is a webinar format that we've set up that doesn't allow for audio from attendees except for those of us on JMT here. So it's sort of a one-way communication. There is a chat tool so you can send messages. However, I find as a person who runs these from time to time that I usually minimize the window that allows me to see if I'm getting a chat message while I'm speaking. And so I often don't see if someone has a question. So I found that it is best to save questions till the very end that are about the content. If you have some sort of technology problem, like I'm cutting out and I don't realize it or something along those lines, then by all means, please do text in or instant message in your question or your comment. Other than that, at the end, I will save time to make sure that if anyone has any specific questions, we can address them then. So without further ado, let's get started. Again, my name, Andy Harleman. I'm with JMT Consulting Group. We've been working with nonprofit organizations exclusively since 1991. And again, we're here today to talk about achieving financial transparency with Sage Intacct. So what I'm going to do is first I want to just give an overview of JMT. I want you to understand who JMT is, who are these people who have reached out and invited me to a webinar. And then I'm going to talk about the concept of nonprofit transparency, what we mean by that. I'm going to talk about why we recommend Sage Intacct as a tool that you can use to achieve that transparency. And then I'm going to give you a lot of examples from the system to give you a sense for that. So we were established, and look at this, I should have corrected that. We were established, we just passed our 28th anniversary. In 1991, in January, we were established. So we've been doing this for 28 years. JMT was founded by Jacqueline M. Tizo. That's where the name comes from. So Jackie was a nonprofit financial manager at several different organizations in the New York City area. And so she, like most of you on the call today, ran the finances for nonprofits, and she had been a buyer for several nonprofit financial management systems throughout her career. And she launched JMT because she believed she could do a lot better than most of the vendors she had worked with at that point, and believed that nonprofits deserved all the best technology available at that time and all the best services available from firms that really understand what nonprofits are all about. Unfortunately, she couldn't find too many firms like that, so she figured she would start her own, and that's where we are today. We were founded up in the New York area, and we now have headquarters in multiple offices at multiple cities, as you can see, across the United States. However, the vast majority of our clients have never been to one of our offices because we come to you. When an organization decides to work with JMT Consulting, typically our consultants fly or drive or take the train to your office. So we have clients actually all over the United States, but we do have those strategic offices. Our team of people all live, sleep, eat, and breathe nonprofit as well. We have people from CPAs and fundraisers and certified technical professionals who all have that background working with nonprofit organizations. And these are 5 of our actual JMT staffers right there on the screen in front of you. As I mentioned, we have over 2,000 clients, and we're all over the United States now, as these red dots show you. So our clients tend to hire us not for where our offices are, but because of our depth and breadth of experience working only with nonprofit organizations. When Jackie founded this firm, it was very important to her that we be independent, and that we have remained for 28 years. JMT is not a software publisher. We are not Sage Intacct, though we are Sage Intacct's largest nonprofit partner. And we're going to talk about Sage Intacct today. But first and foremost, we're an independent firm who understands nonprofits, and we apply our understanding of nonprofits to our selection as to which software companies we're going to partner with. Jackie takes it very seriously. She's not putting her initials next to any software product that doesn't meet her rigorous standards for how best to serve nonprofits. And that is something that has lasted all of this time with JMT. And what that means is that there have been partnerships with software publishers over the years that we have chosen to discontinue because those software products no longer met our standards. And what that also means is that we're constantly aware of what the products in the marketplace are. And we are, as you can imagine, being a firm of our size, we are approached pretty regularly by most of the major software companies you've ever heard of. And the only ones we've said yes to are the ones you see on the screen now. We say no to most of them. And that's because we have our standards for nonprofits means that, you know, most of the software we look at, we just don't see the nonprofit functionality that we think our clients need. And so the ones that we currently work with are Sage Intacct, Vena, Adaptive, Workforce Go, and Abila. Some of these others we used to work with, but we don't any longer, but we have worked with, as you can see, many different vendors over the years. What JMT does is, I would say it's fair to say that we're mostly known in the marketplace for helping nonprofit organizations implement financial management systems and systems that at least touch financial management systems, whether it be budgeting and planning or payroll and time. But that's mostly what we're known for, though we do many other things. We do system integration work. We help with financial planning and analysis. Some clients hire us to do what's called a business process review, where we'll come in and look at all of your systems and make recommendations and write that up for you. And we also give ongoing technical and business support to our clients. But the bottom line is we have very high standards for ourselves. Jackie founded this firm with those high standards, and every single employee at JMT shares those. And it's really centered entirely around our commitment to you and our commitment to the nonprofit sector. You just will not find another firm out there of our size that works only with nonprofits. We are inspired by our clients. We look to them every day, and we think to ourselves, hey, if we can help them be better at what they do, then we are literally helping the world be a better place. And so in that spirit, we believe very strongly in some of the things you see on this screen. But I would say that one of the most important is that we are here for the long haul. Our clients, we look at that client relationship as a long-term commitment. We're not just here to do a job for you and be gone. We're here to support you for the life of your organization. When you're looking at software, far too often, we see organizations that focus their due diligence process on the actual software tool. And there are lots of software tools out there, and you know what? A lot of them are great. But if you don't implement it correctly, it's like throwing your money away. And so what we always tell people is we encourage you to do as much or more due diligence on the partner who helps you to implement these tools than on the tools themselves, as you do on the tools themselves. So bottom line is JMT doesn't fail. You see a lot of technology firms, a lot of technology statistics out there with some pretty frightening failure rates. And not very long ago, I had a phone call from someone who had chosen a different firm than JMT. And then about a year later, they called me up and said, we made a mistake. We should have gone with you guys. We are literally scrapping the tens of thousands of dollars we spent on this other vendor, and we want to start fresh with you, JMT. This is not uncommon for us to have this kind of a conversation. And our clients choose us because they want that safety and security of knowing that JMT is going to help them to be successful and not challenge or certainly not fail them. So that's who JMT is. And now I hope that gives you a sense for, you know, our credentials here as we get into talking about this topic. This topic we call transparency. And what does that mean? So, you know, everybody's different. We all have our different ideas of what that word means. To me, that word carries with it implications about how you appear to the outside world, not just internally. And so when I talk about other terms like visibility today, I'm going to be, sometimes I will think of visibility and transparency as one and the same. At other times, I think visibility is more about what you're looking at internally, and transparency is more about how the outside world sees you. But I may interchange them, and I hope you can follow what we're talking about here today. But what it really comes down to is, if you look at this triangle, think about the bottom, which I call the bare minimum, just being in compliance. Well, we all have rules to follow. Nonprofits have to, you know, be in compliance with the 990, and they have to do the financial statements. They have to keep track of their restrictions as the IRS requires. That's at least the bare minimum. You have grantors and funders who may have other requirements for you to at least meet those requirements to be able to continue getting funding. We all should be, at a minimum, compliant. Over the years, in my time with JMT, I have seen many organizations who call us up who are not even there yet. They're on some patchwork system where they're not even able to be in compliance, and they're in pretty serious straits, and they need to get at least to that bare minimum level, and of course we can help you. But we don't want to stop there, nor do we want to stop at the second level, which is efficiency. Sure, it's an improvement over compliance. How well do you use your resources? Are we more efficient? Well, absolutely. That is the next step up the ladder. But where transformation really occurs in an organization is when you get to the top tier, when you get to the visibility and viability, when you can truly see not just budget to actuals, but you can actually start thinking in terms of the outcome measures and ultimately tell the outside world how you make a difference with their funds and change the world with your services. And so that's what we want to talk about today, is that level of visibility, that level of transparency, so that your organization can experience transformation. We had a keynote at one of our recent Innovate conferences, and Innovate is our exclusive conference, which I'll tell you more about later. Our keynote, my friend Kevin Munroe had a great quote here, which is, people are moved to action and investment more by the difference you make than the work you do. In other words, we can all tell you what we do. We can all tell you what our work is. But these days, funders, they really want to understand, well, okay, but what's the difference? In the old days, it used to be enough to talk about just debits and credits and revenues and expenditures and show that you weren't losing money and show that that you knew how to balance your checkbook. But today, you don't just want to document the outcomes, but you want to showcase the results. And that's what we think of when we talk about true transparency to the outside world and that transformation that we hope you can experience. Most organizations have a goal of perpetual performance improvement. You look at like the what. What data do we have? What do we know? But there's a so what that comes after that. Great, okay, we have all this data, but what does that mean? What does it mean for us internally, and ultimately, what does it mean to our funders and to the outside world? Whether our funders are individual donors, whether our funders are grantors, whether our funders are the governments. What does it mean to them, this data? And then finally, what are we going to do with this information that we have? How can we showcase those results, as Kevin Munroe said? And how can we show how we're changing the world? So some of the trends that you see, excuse me, I double hit the button there. Some of the things that you're seeing more and more nonprofit organizations are really focused on, there's a real shift in economics that's going on that's creating more demand. And while you are all nonprofits, and in the world of nonprofit, we don't like to talk about competition, the very real reality is there is much more competition for every funding dollar that's out there. And again, maybe it's a grant, maybe it's a private donor, but nonetheless, there's competition for that dollar. And with that increased focus means you must have more measurable progress, or very candidly, you're going to find yourself left behind. One of the biggest things that we're seeing these days with nonprofit organizations, I would say one of the most exciting things that I've seen even in my 10+ years with JMT, is a real transformation just in general to looking more at things like KPIs, key performance indicators in nonprofit organizations. So there are lots, you've probably heard this term many times, there are lots of ways to think of it, but really it's just a type of that performance measurement, and it's just a way for an organization to really talk about its success with a particular activity. And what is important to you and your organization, of course, depends entirely on the department within your organization or your organization itself, but ultimately, what is your mission? And I like to think of the KPI as really just pieces of the story that sum up to tell what your mission really is all about. So basically, we like to think of them as kind of a continuous health check on how your organization is doing. They provide a lot of visibility to both long and short-term objectives, I should say, and they really help you to track progress towards your established goals and take the guesswork out of it. we were really big believers at JMT in the idea of not guessing. We don't want to guess. We don't want you to have to guess. And so KPIs is a way to do that. They're also a great way to have an early warning if, in fact, you're getting off track. Here's an example of a very unpretty, deliberately so, a very unpretty financial KPI. You see down at the bottom here, this is basically like an Excel spreadsheet. You see down at the bottom here, there are some ratios that are, and they are KPIs. So it's one thing to have them, and we're talking about KPIs, we're talking about visibility here, but there's also the how you present them, which is a very big part of it. You can't discount the presentation and how things look. So here is an example from Excel that's not pretty, and we're going to get into showing you how Intacct can take this concept and make it more pretty. Again, another one that's not pretty, but basically it's if you look at some of these targets and trending that you see within this little chart here, it serves a purpose, but it's communicating information. So we've seen a lot of organizations do things like make charts like this, maybe using Word or PowerPoint or Excel. We've seen Excel documents like what you saw on the previous slide over the years. But what we start seeing is nonprofit organizations really need to have tools out there that can do a better job automatically calculating these things, but also presenting them in a way that's much more pleasing to the eye and easier to consume, so to speak. And so that leads me into talking about why do we work with Sage Intacct? Why is it that we put our reputation in the hands of a partner like Intacct? Because JMT doesn't take that lightly. First off, one of the things we learned about Intacct as we studied them, I think it's been about a decade now that we've been a partner with them, is that they're committed to the nonprofit vertical market, as they call it, because that isn't a vertical market for JMT, that is our market. It's 30% of Intacct, so that's a very big, significant chunk of their business. They have hired key staff from the NFP world, from lots of other places. It's not that big of a world that we live in here, the world of nonprofit accounting software. And so we know a lot of people who've worked at a lot of different places. And for example, the former CEO of MIP Fund Accounting from back in the day, he is an Intacct key nonprofit employee. There are technical and support staff and even members of the team that develops the software who we've known, who've worked at other software companies over the years. So Intacct has truly gathered some of the greatest minds in the nonprofit financial management world and put them onto their team. And you could see that GuideStar, which actually I heard just got changed their name, but I'm going to keep calling them GuideStar until I have committed that to better memory. But GuideStar even gives an exclusive endorsement to Intacct, and they even have helped create a digital dashboard book for Intacct to be able to display some of the visibility things we're going to talk about today. Other reasons besides that commitment to the nonprofit market, it truly is cutting edge technology. Now, this is not a technology conversation so much today, but it is important. I think all of us can relate to areas and maybe in our personal life where we're consumers of technology. You don't want to buy something that's already dated. You don't want to buy an iPhone that's 2 versions old because you're just going to regret it real soon. And Intacct is truly the latest generation of technology. It's a multi-tenant SaaS technology. It is not an old Microsoft SQL database that's being stuck on a server somewhere and with cloud access. We call that partly cloudy. It's true cloud multi-tenant software. It is exclusively endorsed by the AICPA, which is obviously an endorsement that you shouldn't take lightly. The premier association of bean counters gives their exclusive endorsement to Intacct, and we like to think that that means something. They do 4 major releases a year. This is incredible. They are able to just, with the bright minds they have in their development team, constantly writing new software and code and innovating, they're able to push releases out 4 times a year. This is amazing for us at JMT because we've been doing this for a long time. We used to think once a year was great. We used to compare once a year to the software vendors out there that were doing it once every 18 months and think that was wonderful. But 4 times a year is how often they're able to do it. But what it really comes down to for JMT is it's powerful, but also usable. One of the things that I would say bugs us the most at JMT is when finance people aren't able to get the information they need because they've got some terrible tool that requires technical knowledge to be able to operate. You have a degree in some sort of financial management, you're working in an organization doing financial analysis and management, that doesn't mean you know how to write script or know how to write code, and that's okay, you shouldn't have to. But you should be able to click on your mouse and get the information you need out of your system, and that's one of the things we find very true of Sage Intacct. So in a nutshell, it is a true best-in-class system. Intacct does one thing, core financials, and they have made a platform that allows them to actually integrate with others. They play nicely in the market. They're not going to try to rope you in and then sell you a bunch of other Sage Intacct tools because they only have one tool, core financials. And we like that at JMT because we believe that every department in your organization should be able to have whatever software they want. If the fundraising people want to use Salesforce, that's okay. You don't have to use any software that you don't want to use in finance just because they've made a choice in development. And so best in class enables that. It also, as you will see, there's a lot of great dashboards and real-time information that provides you that visibility and transparency that we're going to see today. So this is not an example of a beautiful, visually pleasing dashboard deliberately. What I want you to do, though, is see this and think about the types of information that you ultimately need to communicate both internally and to the outside world. And I would say having all of this information at your disposal and broadcast to the outside world is what really kind of formulates this whole notion or idea of transparency and visibility. So taking this, word description and converting it into a way that makes more sense is kind of what we're talking about here today. So let's start with, back to the concept of the KPIs. I just listed, again, you see some of these things here that are important to an organization, of course. But these are actual screenshots from Intacct's what they call performance cards, which are right on their dashboards. Allows you to really see things like your ability to pay off your current debt and to know what your liquidity is, and the ratios that allow you to be able to see your ability to pay short-term liabilities and your current assets divided by your current liabilities. So, when an outside funder, when an organization's health is being looked at by the outside world, these kinds of ratios are obviously quite important. And if you don't have a software that can do this, it could possibly raise doubt about your organization. And this is a great way to give that transparency so that people understand your general health from a pure financial standpoint. Other tools, these are other examples from Sage Intacct. These are screenshots from actual Sage Intacct dashboards that you can see, whether it's about asset or net asset composition. Ultimately, what are we required to do in nonprofit organizations is keep track of the nature of restrictions on our net assets. And of course, they've just changed it to where it's not just where it's basically either it's restricted or it isn't, whereas we used to have to deal with temporarily restricted. And if this were a live room, I would ask for a show of hands of number of organizations who have already moved to the new standards. Usually we don't see more than about 10% have done it yet, but it's coming, and you should have the ability to track that, and you will in a tool like Intacct. So these are other ratios that you can see that really give a good sense of the financial health and the financial transparency of your organization. Within finance, of course, is the whole idea of cash. Cash matters. We all know that. Even nonprofits go out of business because they just don't have the right cash flow. And so you've got to be able to have cash management KPIs. As you can see here, another example from an Intacct dashboard that demonstrates that. And yet here's some more. Days of cash on hand, liquidity, and even a cash flow, which allows you to see trending. So these are, again, great pieces of information for any outside person who wants to understand the health of your nonprofit and perhaps even donate to you. Now, we can move out of financial and talk a little bit more also about things like operational. So Intacct allows you to set things up like an operational dashboard to track things like your program efficiency. What it comes down to is, we all know funders want to understand how efficient you are with their money so that ultimately you can provide the services you're there to provide in the most efficient way without a lot of extra overhead. So these are some examples of other dashboards that you might see in Sage Intacct that can give that picture. And obviously in nonprofit organizations, personnel tends to be the biggest expenditure. And you can see the trends, you can see the comparisons on some of these. Many organizations have multiple streams of funding. Yours may as well. These days, it's increasingly rare for us to come upon a nonprofit organization who gets all of its funding from one particular source. So it's good to understand your sources of revenue as well. Speaking of revenue, there are revenue KPIs that you can see. Some organizations, maybe it's depending on your locations where you're providing your services. Maybe you want to at least have a snapshot look at a pie chart type of thing. This is all good information, not only internally, but externally to the outside world. And then there's the program, the idea of actually talking about the services you provide and the programs and the whether it be meals delivered, clients served, members. I'm going to open up a live copy of Intacct here in a moment, and I'll show you another example related to this, where a real example from one of our clients who was able to use this kind of metric to actually plan for revenue for the coming year. But program efficiency, these are some sample types of programs that you might see offered in a nonprofit organization. And that's obviously quite good information to have to understand where our expenses going and to understand what our efficiency is. You can even trend it with arrows like this. Again, these are all things that are provided in the Sage Intacct system. So those were just some overview snapshots of it. But now what I'd like to do is, as I mentioned, open up the actual software and get into it a little bit here. Now, full disclosure, this is a demo database. We've just basically made up a bunch of sample nonprofit data for the purposes of using for webcasts and things. And what I want you to understand is this is such a flexible tool that it actually, we have to basically build sample dashboards. So if you were to say, hey, I love Intacct, I'd love to get it in my organization, but I don't want to have this day's cash on hand thing in the upper left. I'd much rather have it in the lower right. Don't worry, this is all 100% personalizable, as I like to say, and allows you to set it up the way you want to set it up. But I did want to give some examples. So when we talk about visibility, the first dashboard here that I have chosen to go to is a CFO dashboard here in this sample nonprofit organization. Remember when I mentioned the performance cards from the screenshots I showed you earlier? Here they are. These are actual ones here. So you can click on any of these and they will show you, they will refresh, and they'll just give you that snapshot view. You can also decide to go down here and look at some of your other reports. So we talked about the cash flow. Remember that earlier, we were saying how important that is. So this would be an example of a CFO who perhaps has the cash flow right here on the top left. Now, when you click into any of these, this is where sort of the concept of visibility and transparency intersect. Again, in my mind, visibility implies a little bit more about how you internally look at things, whereas transparency is how easy it is for people outside of your organization to see it. But this is an example. I clicked on that one report, it opened up the actual report here in a different window. And now you can see I can click into it further. And when I do that, it will allow me to see the details behind this actual report that we have in here. And so while that's, there we go. I had an internet concern. I hope my voice audio is still working here, because that pause there, I was just concerned about that for a moment, and I'm on a voice over IP phone, so please let me know if there's a problem. But I've now opened that monthly cash flow report, and you can see these blue numbers, which represent an ability to do further drill down. So I'm running it back for 5-year-old data here, just for the purposes of a demo here, but I can click into this and see further and get the visibility. I'm now down to my actual week-to-week contribution receipts in my system. And so you will see that I can click into any of these and see the actual general ledger transactions all the way behind that report. Now, I'm only able to show you one screen here, but if I, like most people these days, if I'm using multiple monitors, I can drag these windows and put them somewhere else. And all behind all of this, the whole way, the original dashboard is still there. So if I start closing things out, you will see it's been here all along. All of that visibility you get right from a dashboard. Ultimately, the ease of that visibility allows you to do better analysis and ultimately allows you to present your data to the outside world and therefore accomplish more transparency. Other examples would be, this is a surplus deficit budget report. If I scroll down here, you can see Sage Intacct also provides you the ability to do more than just debits and credits and AP and cash management, but to do other things too, like perhaps integrate timesheets into your system. Perhaps, many organizations have to worry about certification of effort, and they need to understand where their staff are spending their time, because their grantors need to understand how much personnel cost goes into each area of the business or the organization. And many organizations actually nowadays are doing purchasing and POs and requisitions and commitments. And it's not so much, you don't want to just know how much money did I spend. You don't want to just know how many checks you cut. You want to understand, well, hey, how many expenses have been committed, essentially. And so you can use a purchasing system like they have in Intacct here to be able to track that. I don't have any pending transactions here, but I might be an approver in one of those things. And this would be an area where I could approve that transaction. And there are other examples here that you can see that can give you more visibility into your organization, whether this monthly cash balance report and so forth. Another one that's really interesting is the idea of billing units over time. Maybe perhaps this organization that they care very deeply about what units they are billing for, because that tells the story of their organization. And so this is an important metric for this particular CFO. What's nice about a tool like Intacct is you can have multiple dashboards. So this is just one that I have in this sample system, but you can literally have unlimited. We have quite a few more set up here. So I'll just give you a flavor for some of those. Another CFO dashboard might look like this. Now this one's in trouble. They've got some trending that shows them that their fundraising expenses are down. But this is the actual, one of the ones we showed you on the slides earlier. But you also see the ability to have something called conditional highlighting, as you can see with the colors here. What's nice about something like this that really can aid in that ongoing desire for more transparency in your organization is that you're able to draw attention to materiality a little bit better when you have visual cues like this. It's not uncommon for a nonprofit board to be comprised in part of really great people who just aren't trained as finance professionals. And maybe they don't know how to read a financial statement as well as a CPA does, or as well as you do in your finance department. I once served on a board myself, and I recall that we had a board member who we had to kind of gently explain to this person that there's such a thing as immaterial variance, and it would have helped in that organization if we had had something like this where we could draw that person's eyes and say, look, I would worry about the darkly shaded red ones. Those are ones we should talk about here today. But let's not spend our time talking about a 17-cent variance somewhere else. And so these visual cues really allow you to help your board be better at what they do, but also even to present to the outside world for that true transparency into your organization. You can trend it and other things with some of the tools that you see here. But again, just certain examples. When it comes to restrictions, you're able to keep track of your restrictions on your net assets. As you see here, I don't have good data on this particular report because I'm running it in a sample database, but you get the idea. You're able to actually hover over and you can see examples of what restricted funds I have sitting there. And then when you click on it, you can open it right up and see your net asset balance report. So this kind of visibility, again, is quite important to you when you're doing your own analysis internally. You can see there are many other fun things about these dashboards, including you can have a news feed on yours or a link to your bank or whatever you want to have. So I think this gives you a sense of some of the things we're talking about. The final dashboard I really want to show you here to give you a sense for this is the one I referenced earlier. This is actually an example of one that one of our clients used in real life. This is not their exact one, of course, this is a sample database. But we were working with a prospect then who is now a client, and they explained to us that their board operates almost like a for-profit in the sense that they believe that they need to kind of shoot for revenue goals, because by hitting revenue goals, they're hitting, they're able to make more of an impact in their community. They do like behavioral health. And so in this example, what they said to us was, hey, at the beginning of every year, my CEO and I, the CFO, sit down and with the number the board gave us and say, well, here's our revenue goal number, hit that. And we know for us, it's all about the revenue per clinician. We know that every clinician brings in revenue. And so if we need to hit a new revenue goal, that gives us great information about how many clinicians we need to hire this coming year. And so we actually set this up as a sample for a sample database when they were in the due diligence process. But in reality, once they decided to move forward with Intacct, they now use it to plan their organization. This is very powerful because Sage Intacct allows you to track not just dollars and cents, but also statistical data like number of clinicians. But more importantly, that number of clinicians is all well and good, but it really only matters when you do a computation with that number of clinicians to come up with how much revenue you average per clinician. That drives real planning, real decision making for this organization, and ultimately allows them to better serve their community and to be more transparent to the outside world. There are many more examples. I could talk for hours about Intacct, and I could show you many other great things about how we can drill in and get this kind of visibility. But I want to open it up now for questions. As I mentioned before, we'd like to have people chat questions if you have any. I'll give it a moment. While we're waiting to see if any questions come through, I am going to pull this up here, which is talking about the JMT conference. Well, still waiting to see if any questions come through, but JMT's conference, just so you know, depending on where you are, is maybe in your backyard or maybe on the other side of the country from you, but we are doing our annual conference called Innovate at the Foxwoods Resort and Casino in Connecticut coming up in May. This is an incredibly exciting event for us. We do this every year. It is a way to get just other great nonprofit professionals together, many of whom are our existing clients who are using software. So we'll have sessions about the software products we support and ongoing training and things like that. But more importantly, we have a financial leadership track designed specifically for nonprofit professionals like yourself. We gather some of the foremost experts in nonprofit finance, whether it be CPAs who do audits of nonprofit finance or other strategic advisors who are able to put together an incredible amount of content to help you in your ongoing challenges of leadership in the nonprofit world in 2019. So that's what this conference is all about. And if you are a CPA, you're able to get CPE credits as well. You can find more about this, of course, on our website at jmtconsulting.com/innovate. Looks like we're not getting any questions, and that's just fine. I do want to say this. We wanted you to get a sense for how Intacct can help you to achieve financial transparency today. We certainly understand that this was a high-level look, and if you have interest in seeing it in more detail, we're absolutely able to personalize a presentation with you. I do have a question, so let me see what this question is. I'll read it. What platforms, if any, does Sage use to share KPIs and dashboards with the outside world, I think that says, and for some reason I'm not able to read the rest of that question, but I think I get the gist of it, which is, and the answer is their own platform is what's used typically, because all of the KPIs and the reports and everything you see there are able to easily be pushed out to things like Excel, PowerPoint, and what have you. In addition, of course, their platform is accessible. So if you want to hook up a tool like a BI tool and hit the data tables in Intacct and pull that information in, you're able to do that as well. As I mentioned earlier, they're what's called a best-in-class solution. So that does mean they allow themselves, they play nicely with others. So if you have any kind of other tool out there, chances are very good that you'd be able to get that data to flow automatically into it. Next question is it compatible with Salesforce? I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, not only is it compatible with Salesforce, but Intacct is a Platinum ISV partner with Salesforce, which I don't believe any other ERP or financial management system is. So they have a very tight integration with Salesforce, and many nonprofit clients these days are using Salesforce in their fundraising department, and we have quite a few ourselves. In fact, just this morning I had a question from someone who was looking and was considering working with Salesforce. And so to that end, it's one thing, I'm glad you brought the question up, and I'll pivot here and go back to the software for just a quick second. In my Sage Intacct system here, you might be able to see, oops, I think I closed it. Here we are. If I go into something like, let me just grab a quick AP bill or something. If I go into an AP bill, actually I need to go into one that is already entered. I want to give you an example of this integration with Salesforce. At the bottom of this transaction, you will see this thing here. This is, if anyone uses Salesforce, this should look very familiar to, because this is actually, in Intacct we call it Collaborate, but it effectively is Salesforce Chatter. And I don't know how this works, but basically Intacct shares the code directly with Salesforce, and they're able to put it into Intacct, which means that even if you don't have Salesforce, but you use Intacct, you still have this. But if you do have Salesforce, this also coordinates between the two systems. So this is like social media within a transaction. You can say things like, at John Smith, why did you code this like this? And so John would then get an email or a notification within Intacct that I had left a note on this transaction that would take them right to the transaction. And they would be able to have a communication on the actual transaction. They wouldn't have to get an email, open the software, and go digging around looking for the actual transaction in question. It's much more easy and convenient to communicate that way. And so that's all part of that Salesforce technology, which comes back to your question of, does it work with Salesforce? All right, let's see if we have any others. Not seeing any more, but finally, I want to punctuate this conversation with saying that we understand everyone on this call is here for different reasons, and we appreciate you spending a piece of your valuable day with us. What we would like to do after this is follow up with you and find out from you just exactly what, if any, follow-up you want from us. Sometimes people say, great information, keep me on the list, tell me the next time you have a webinar. Other times people say, look, I'm actually really needing to talk to someone about switching software like as soon as possible. We'll respect you. We're not going to try to push you into the first path if the second path is more appropriate, or vice versa. So just tell us how you want to communicate with us, and we will respect that, I promise. I do see another question. How does Sage Intacct integrate with third-party AP systems? Another great question. I think maybe the best way to answer that is to pull this up. If I go to the website, you can see, think of this like if you have an iPhone or an Android or something, the App Store. Sage has an Intacct marketplace. These are all applications that have been written to integrate, or that have pre-written integrations with Intacct. So they have literally hundreds out here that allow you to integrate, whether it's, here's one right here, that's AP, there's Avid Exchange, there's others. So many, many partners work with it that allow you to automate that AP. And it's an interesting question also because it's really indicative of a trend we're seeing in the nonprofit world, which is many more organizations than ever before are starting to think about things like outsourcing AP or automating it in other ways. And we embrace this. We think this is great because, again, it comes down to more efficiency, which helps you move up that triangle that I showed at the beginning here and get much more towards true effectiveness. So as I mentioned before, we are going to follow up with everybody who's been on the call, but in the meantime, if you want to call us before we call you, just go to jmtconsulting.com and you will be able to find our contact information there. My name is Andy Harleman, as I mentioned before, and you can find me at aharleman, Harleman, at jmtconsulting.com, or if you go to our website, you can find my extraordinarily handsome photo and bio and contact information there as well. We really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much. Hope this has been a good use of your time. We are recording this, so I expect we should be able to send a copy out to anyone who would like one. And before I go, it looks like there is another question. Oh, and I answered it. We are sending out a recording. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.